We are the foundation, bulletproof the hating from the plantation. We built the whole nation. We are the foundation, bulletproof the hating from the plantation. We built the whole nation. We are the foundation, bulletproof the hating from the plantation. We built the whole nation. We are the foundation, bulletproof the hating from the plantation. We built the whole nation.
So the BS continues. The African Union decided to join forces with Caricom to try to establish a quote-unquote global reparations fund. This video is fair use, and of course, roll the footage.
A conference calling for an action plan on slavery reparation is currently underway in Accra. From the 15th to the 19th century, at least 12.5 million Africans were kidnapped and forcibly transported by European ships and merchants and sold into slavery. Ghana's President, Nana Akufo-Addo, has been a vocal advocate for reparatory justice over the damage done by the slave trade. Our Justice Baidu brings us more from the Ghanaian capital.
It is day 2 of what would be a 4-day conference that is being attended by not less than 5 African heads of state, including the chair of the African Union, Azali Assoumani. Speaker after speaker at this conference have been justifying why the continent deserves this reparations. The President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, who made a very bold statement at the last UN General Assembly in September, repeated it today, saying that the West had built its wealth and superpower on the back of the exploitation that it had caused on the continent and its people. And the continent, deserved these reparations to have a closure to the issue of the slave trade.
Predictably, the question of reparations becomes a debate only when it comes to Africa and Africans. When the British ended slavery, all the owners of enslaved Africans received reparations to the tune of some 20 million pounds sterling, the equivalent today of some 20 billion pounds sterling. But enslaved Africans themselves did not receive a penny. Likewise, in the United States of America, owners of slaves received $300 for every slave they owned. The slaves themselves received nothing.
This meeting is expected to produce an action plan to ensure the achievement of the payment of these reparations. It is also expected to put together an African-led committee that will push for this to happen. The third thing that this meeting is expected to do is also to connect the people that are attending this meeting and the broader people on the continent to the diaspora to help sustain this advocacy.
Now, before we continue to expose this fraudulent claim, let's take a little deep dive more into this, shall we? A global movement to seek reparations for slavery has been forged during a summit in Ghana this week, with the African Union partnering with Caribbean countries to form a united front to persuade European nations to pay for historical mass crimes. The partnership between the 55-member African Union and the Caribbean community, Caricom, of 20 countries will aim to intensify pressure on former slave-owning nations to engage with the reparations movement. Delegates also announced the establishment of a global fund based in Africa, aiming to accelerate the campaign. A draft proclamation circulated at the end of the 4-day conference did not specify what form the reparations should take, but announced that the African Union would explore litigation options and work with the United Nations to assess whether acts of enslavement against Africans constituted serious violations of human rights at the time they were committed. A finalized version of the document, the Accra Proclamation, is expected to be released this weekend. Opening the conference, Ghana's President, Nana Akufo-Addo, said, "The entire period of slavery meant that our progress economically, culturally, and psychologically was stifled. There are legions of stories of families who were torn apart. You cannot quantify the effects of such tragedies, but they need to be recognized. The entire continent of Africa deserves a formal apology from the European nations involved in the slave trade, he said, adding, no amount of money can restore the damage caused by the transatlantic slave trade and its consequences. This is a matter that the world must confront and can no longer ignore. Foundational family. Yeah, I know what y'all thinking. Now wait a minute, nigga. Wait a minute, Nana Akufo-Addo. I agree with you that the progress of West Africa was stifled. That's because your people, your ancestors, voluntarily sold slaves to the Europeans. And it wasn't just anybody you were selling to the Europeans. You sold the youngest, the smartest, the strongest, the most intelligent people who existed in those parts of Africa at the time to the Europeans. Which is why those parts of Africa that were involved in the slave trade fell and became the third world. Prior to the slave trade, those kingdoms in West Africa were thriving. Even the Europeans wrote what they saw when they first went to West Africa about those great kingdoms that existed prior to slaves being sold to them. Let me get this straight. You voluntarily sold the strongest, the most intelligent, the most vibrant, the most productive people who existed on the continent of Africa to the Europeans, which in turn made the Europeans rich, filthy rich, wealthy, world superpowers, and you think you deserve reparations for something you voluntarily did. Nah, nigga. That's not how it worked. You volunteer. I know the slaves were brought to North America, South America, the Caribbean. Right now, I'm just focused on FBA. I'm talking about the FBA slaves that you sold. The people you sold into slavery in the other West African kingdoms, Mr. Otto, built the White House, built the U.S. Capitol, single-handedly made the United States of America an economic superpower. Single-handedly created all the major genres of American music, from rock to jazz to hip-hop, that engulfed the whole planet, and to this day is generating billions of dollars. You voluntarily sold the greatest people that Africa had to offer into slavery, and now you think you deserve reparations, nigga. And foundational family. If you notice this little union between the African nation and the Caribbean nations of Caricom, what's the common denominator in this foundational family? Not once did they mention reparations for foundational Black Americans. Did you notice that? The Caribbeans and the Africans joined forces for reparations and kept us out of it. But dumbass Pan-Africanists like Dr. Umar Johnson expects Black Americans to fight for reparations for all Black people on the globe. This is what we're talking about. Everybody expects us to feed everybody, but people unite and feed themselves and leave us out of it. Everybody gets to eat off our plate and their plate, but we only get to eat off our plate. We can't eat off their plates. You notice that? How many times FB gotta tell you Pan-Africans niggas that these Caribbeans and Africans do not have our best interests at heart? They don't care about us. They are fighting. They joined forces to fight for reparations for them and left us out of it. You dumb niggas. And do these Caribbeans know that the Africans were the ones who sold them into slavery too? Do y'all know that, Caribbeans? And you're joining forces with them for reparations? The president of Ghana said Europe owes the whole continent of Africa an apology for slavery. How? You were doing business with the Europeans. You were in cahoots selling the slaves to the Europeans. An apology for what? Y'all was business partners, you dumb nigga. And now because you Africans got the short end of the stick, you sold our ancestors for damn mirrors, muskets, sword, and umbrellas. We're turning in trillions of dollars of profits for the Europeans, and now you think you deserve reparations? You sold slaves, 40 people for one umbrella. And you voluntarily, I might add, and you think you deserve reparations for being a dumbass. No, nigga. Of course, Africa fell off and slipped into the third world after you sold the slaves because you sold the best people that Africa had to offer. When we was there, Africa had some of the richest kingdoms on the planet. That's a fact. And then when you sold us off, the places you sold us to turned into some of the most prosperous kingdoms on the planet. Do you see how it worked? Wherever we're at turns prosperous. It's not rocket science. You sold the Israelites, dummy. You sold God's people, literally, and you think you deserve reparations. This is the prototypical African scam if I ever seen one. You worked hand in hand with the Europeans, voluntarily selling human beings into slavery for fucking mirrors, and you think you deserve reparations. For what? Talking about no amount of money can restore the damage caused by the transatlantic slave trade and its consequences. You volunteered for those consequences. The Africans voluntarily sold slaves. Nobody was kidnapped. At that time, the Europeans did not know the interior Africa like that to go in and round up slaves. Only the people who was there knew the interior and where to go and who to get. That was the Africans, nigga. All the Europeans did was go to the slave ports and purchase slaves who were rounded up by the Africans, the Arabs, and sorry to say this, Pan-African, the Moors too. Yes, the Moors were involved in our enslavement. That's a fact. And just like now, everybody teams up to go against us. It was the same way back then. We had the Native West Africans, the Europeans, the Moors, and the Arabs, you forming like fucking Voltron, selling our ancestors into slavery. Fast forward 400 years, and what we got, FBA? We got all these other ethnicities forming like Voltron to try to erase our culture and history. Hey, they say there's nothing new under the sun, right, FBA? You can't make this stuff up. And then they said we're being divisive because we see the light now, delineating and only caring about our own ethnic group, like all these other ethnic groups only cares about their people and leaves us out to dry like these Caribbeans and Africans are doing with this fake-ass reparations summit. they say one time about black Americans getting reparations. Just them. Well, since they melanated, black Americans supposed to help them and care about them. Nah, nigga, them days is over, nigga. Hold your own nuts. Talking about there are legions of stories of families who were torn apart. Of course there was, because y'all sold the families into slavery. And then when we got over here, our families were torn apart again when they were selling our babies to different slave plantations. Thanks a lot, Africans. And now you slave traders think you deserve reparations for voluntarily selling human beings for worthless items. And do you notice how the president of Ghana was trying to use us, our history in America, to try to justify why reparations are older than Africa? Do you see how they use us to try to use us to eat? Talking about the slave owners in the United States were compensated $300 a piece, and the enslaved people received nothing. Don't try to use our history and our slavery that your Africans put us in to try to get a bag, nigga. Don't try to use us. We're tired of everybody trying to eat off of us. These are the same people who will get mad and call you an Akata, a slave, and tell you that you eat slave food.
That's slave food.
Now you want to pretend like you care about us when you don't. To try to get a bag. Nah, it ain't going down like that, son. African Union, Caricom, y'all could take your little BS reparations claim and shove it up your black ass.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Channel Raw TV Bay Bay.